largest aquamarine in the world is called the Dom Pedro, named after the two emperors of Brazil. It is a 60-pound, 2-foot long, 10,363 carat obelisk. When they first got it, they didn't know what to do with it. They saw the beauty. They wanted to keep it all intact. So they created a brand new cut called the Fantasy Cut. Something for you to think about when you get dressed in the morning. Discover the value in your story.
Increase. So this award lets me know that
Good morning. Bonjour. Comment ça va? Et toi? Ça va très bien. Bienvenue. Wanying. Bienvenidos, bienvenita, benvenita, namaste, and welcome. Welcome to another exciting episode of Gem Hunter Stories. My name is Barry B. Mixon, and I am a gemological storyteller. And what I do here each week is I take the art, science, history, and magic of gemstones, precious metals, and fine jewelry, and I put them all together into a story. What I've discovered over the years is that many of the same characteristics, many of the same traits, the same attributes that we so highly value in gemstones, you can find in people. So what I do is I take those stories and use them to create a template, to create a bridge, an inception point, to help people, to empower people to discover the value of their own stories, of how they feel about themselves, of how they all came together, how all of us interact with the light. Thank you, Barbara. As most of you know, I am here in France. I've been here since the beginning of the month. And the first couple of weeks I spent in this beautiful place in the Mediterranean, which is also part of France. It's called Corsica. And I had an opportunity to really take a lot of time to think. I mean, I've been teaching, busy schedule, teaching. First, before I even say anything else, I want to say congratulations to my brother, Charlie Jones, who just had a child, him and Leah and Everly. Everly is the baby girl. So we have another beautiful girl in the world, another queen. So congratulations, and congratulations as well to everyone who I've met and who's watching this show. So this has been a phenomenal month so far. And Mother's Day in the United States was last Sunday. And I put a post on there about just about how I felt about my own mom and the things that I learned. And I began to see a lot of the same characteristics. I'm always thinking in terms of gemstones. I'm always thinking about how do things in our lives imitate or analogies for gemstones and vice versa. So I wanted to name this show, and I not wanted to, I named this show Understanding and Appreciating the Breathtaking Value of Emeralds and Mothers. And when I say mothers, I'm not just talking about mothers who actually biologically had a child. I'm talking about women who have that spirit inside of them, because there's so many women, and I've benefited from women in my life who obviously were not my mother, but the things that they did for me changed my life. And I just thought that this would be the perfect time to really just express that evolution, to tell that story. So this is Corsica. I'm in point of view. Literally, what you're looking at is the city of Ajaccio. Ajaccio is the city of Napoleon Bonaparte, and we've talked about him many times. So this is just the view from the house I was living in, and this is the Mediterranean Sea. Yes, it is just that blue. Here's the mountains that are there's a very mountainous island. So this is Corsica and the beach, and literally had a chance to walk down the whole entire beach. The boat that I went to Ajaccio with is right here in this pier in the lower left-hand corner. So it's fantastic. And one of the things that gemology has allowed me to do and made me really appreciate is the whole concept of time. The whole concept of time, because when you really think about it, what I do for a living is I work with things that have been here for thousands, sometimes millions and billions of years before I came. I'm holding that object in my hand, and that object is going to guarantee last longer than I will. I'm 62 years old. I don't know how much longer I have in my life. I appreciate every day, but I know that that gemstone is going to last longer than me. And what I began as a gemological storyteller, you begin to understand and appreciate stories. You begin to appreciate what story each gemstone has. What is it made out of? How was it composed? What was the molecular structure of it? All these stories. And as a gemologist, as a gemological storyteller, as a person, you begin to understand the importance of stories. And as I always say, value. Just that value that gemstone has, because it became, because of what it went through, because of how it was polished, how it was faceted, how it was found, how it was worn, all these things. These are the values. So each and every week when I end the show by saying discover the value of your story. I'm not just saying it because it sounds good to me, and I want to spend the rest of my life, as I told you many times about my promise I made to God, to really understand who you are and the people that you have touched in your life. I was sitting on this beach when all this started coming together, just recognizing how magnificent this moment is in my life, that I'm experiencing something that so many people have never had a chance to experience for a variety of reasons. Okay, who it never happened to where they're just in a magical, beautiful place. And I think all of us, wherever you are, you have to appreciate where you're at. You know, when you see me every week, wherever I am, I want you to understand that 30 years ago, where I was, that I was homeless. So as I began to think about, and all these are my pictures, these are pictures I actually took. Um, you begin to think about why you're here. Like, how did it happen? How did this guy, one of my high school friends said, "Can you believe that Barry Mixon is in France speaking French in another country? Can you believe it?" And when he said it, I just said, I absolutely understand how you feel, because this is amazing. And when I really started to boil down a story, when you put together a story, you have to ask yourself, what is the sound? What is the initial direction that got you here? How did I get here? And ultimately, I had to really, and clearly, it just came to me, my mother. My mother. And it was so profound, that thought was because these pictures were taken on Mother's Day. On Mother's Day, that I took these pictures, because, and it meant so much to me to be here in this place, looking at this scene, look at these pictures, being here, understanding that everything that I experienced in my life, all the things that my mother helped me see, because my mother never went anywhere. I remember asking my mother once, I was maybe 10, 12 years old, when I asked my mother, "Mom, how come you never go anywhere?" And I said, you know how kids are that age, it's just like, I said it almost as if I was embarrassed. Why don't you ever go anywhere? And my mother looked at me like, "Boy, please." She says, "I go places all the time." And I said, "Where? Where do you go?" And she says, "Last week I was in Spain. The week before that, I was in Australia, and I'm always in London." I'm looking at her like, okay, mom has gone crazy. And then I said, "Mom," of course, in my head, I want to say, "Oh, you crazy," but this is mom. You don't say that. So, mommy, I, I don't understand. You were here. I was here with you the whole time. She said to me, "Barry, where do you think I go when I read?" And it dawned on me that the reason why I'm where I'm at, the reason why I am seeing things like this, this is the footprints that my mother helped me create, that I'm creating now, is because of the stories that my mother told me. Not only not told me directly, but told me through pointing me in that direction. Those stories are allowing me to be where I'm at, to create those footsteps. And when you really understand what stories are, you begin to understand that these footprints that I created, 4 days ago, they're going to be washed away. They're going to be washed away. My footprints, those footprints that I just showed you, literally maybe about a foot away from the waves. These footprints are already gone. And it made me appreciate what I do as a storyteller, because I understand that we, unlike gemstones, we have a limited amount of time. We have a limited amount of time to do whatever, to create our stories. This is why storytelling is vitally important, because we're not an emerald. This emerald has been around for hundreds of thousands of years. An emerald this quality may have been owned 5,000 years ago. That's how long emeralds live. They exist. And I began to think how emeralds, or all gemstones, are just a window of how we can begin to see ourselves, how we can begin to see not just the beauty of who we are, or the beauties of how we turned out, but how all the things had to come together in order to create what this is. This is, as I told you, well, this month, emerald, and I've told you before, emerald is basically aluminum beryllium silicate with a hint of chromium. And that's what gives it its color. That's what gives it its color. And a student of mine asked me, she had difficulties understanding. And I just said, a gemstone has no color without light. Without light, without a light going through this object, there is no color. And it's the things that's inside. Once you get the light, it's the things that's inside of that aluminum, beryllium, silicate, chromium in this case, that gives it that green color. And that's what made me begin to understand that my mother, your mother, all of our mothers were the light. That was the beginning of the light. Not only did they give us life, but they created the structure of who we are, as human beings. So, and usually when I start thinking in a certain way, as I told you, each week, this show is a journey for me. I have no idea. When I ended this show last week, I knew I was going to talk about emeralds, but I didn't know which direction I was going to talk about emeralds. And so this is a symphony of thoughts and ideas that come together that I'm so honored to bring you each week. Because after that thought process was going on the beach of Corsica, I came back to my house and I watched the Netflix series of Cleopatra. And you guys know that I'm a huge fan of Cleopatra. If, in fact, I would rather meet, if I had a choice to go back in time, who would I rather meet? And I always say Napoleon, but really, honestly, if I had to pick just one person, I'd want to meet Cleopatra. Cleopatra was an awesome woman. And we're not going to get into, the Netflix series as a documentary. It didn't do well. It's not doing well. Got some of the lowest ratings. But basically, it told the story. Most of it I already knew. It told the story of Cleopatra and her two lovers. One eventually became her husband, Mark Antony and Julius Caesar. But ultimately, what I got out of the show was the concept of that first of all, we're not even going to talk about whether or not she was black or white. We're not going to talk about that. What we're going to talk about is, it's not that it doesn't deserve to be talked about. It's just, when you think in terms of emeralds come in a variety of colors. So we're not going to talk about whether or not what color Cleopatra was. What we're going to talk about is the fact that she was yes, she was an emerald, but most of all, she was a mom. Cleopatra loved emeralds. And that's what I started thinking about the show. I started thinking about how Cleopatra loved emeralds, and I never really understood why. I mean, other than the fact that they're beautiful, I never understood why Cleopatra loved emeralds until I watched this show, because ultimately what I learned from this show is that Cleopatra was a mother. She was a mother, and I knew she had kids, but the show, her story, that story made me see Cleopatra in a completely different way. Possibly because I was already, one, it was Mother's Day. Two, I'm already thinking about how my life has changed because of my mother. And I always want people to understand, I didn't have the kind of mother that most people talk about, like, oh, my mother was this, and, that wasn't my mom. That wasn't my mom. And I think I always say that because when you understand gemstones, you begin to understand that all gemstones are different. Like an emerald. When you look at an emerald has things going on with it that is positive, that is rare, and then there's things that make emeralds not that different than a diamond or peridot. So when I was watching this show and looking at Cleopatra, the thing that resonated with me the most was that she was a mom. She was a queen, yes. She came from a, oh my God, a totally dysfunctional family under Ptolemy family. I mean, they literally plotted and killed each. I mean, it was like Game of Thrones within a family. And some of us know exactly how that feels. Some of us haven't talked to our brothers or sisters, or some of us understand that, but ultimately, none of that affected her as being a mom. So when you understand emeralds is a gemstone of fertility. Fertility. So as I was watching the documentary, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, oh, I see why she loved emeralds. Because here's a fun fact about Cleopatra. Cleopatra loved emeralds so much. First of all, she was like the richest woman in the world. Cle- Emeralds, she had everything. And emeralds, it's not that she discovered emeralds, because the Ptolemy, her family ruled Egypt for about almost 300 years. So emeralds, but she took it to the next level. She wasn't happy with just the emerald mines that her family owned. Because she was queen, she said, I want them all. So literally, there are many, many mines. Most of them all mined out now, but many of the mines, the emerald mines, were named after her. Where they were called Cleopatra. Cleopatra 1, 2, 3, 4. How many emeralds? But part of her love of emeralds was because she was a mother. And what emeralds meant, emeralds was the gemstone of Isis, and she was the embodiment of Isis. She was the mother of Egypt. She was the spiritual mother of Egypt. So there was a relationship. Cleopatra had 4 kids. She had Caesarion, who was Julius Caesar's son. Then she had two babies. She had twins with Mark Antony, Alexander, and Cleopatra. Like she had twins with Mark Antony. Then she had another child, Ptolemy, who was the last child she had. And the whole time I'm watching the show, I'm thinking, as a son, I'm thinking that here's a woman that did all these things that she did, and yet she still had time to love her children. At least that's the way it was portrayed in the documentary. You saw the love. In fact, many of the things she did was to either protect or to elevate her children. She made moves in her life in order so her children would have a better life, all the way to death. And it just made me think about how many people in my life, starting with my mother, starting with Anna. My mother's name was Anna. Okay. And um, I think about all the things that Anna did. I think about all the things that my mother did to make what I do today possible. And you begin, and you have to see the value of that. You have to stop and appreciate the value of that. There are, as far as green gemstones, there are like literally 100 gemstones that have a green variety to it. They have that, and most green gemstones are made up or green because of the same reasons. Either they have chromium, vanadium, or structurally iron. Like peridot is green because it has iron in it. So, but all of them are different. All of them came about in a different way, which makes emeralds really, really special, because for that to come together to create an emerald required something special. And that is that's what my mother gave me. I suffered I had to endure what it took to live as my mother's child, Emeralds are created because of titanic forces, continents coming together is what makes emeralds what they are. Most of the best emeralds can be found in Colombia. Colombia, South America, and when you think about where Colombia is, that shape and the shape, how we talking science now, how the continents used to be together, and once upon a time, South America and Africa were together, and those were the titanic forces that helped create emeralds. And you still had to bring together that secret ingredient to make that work. That's what my mother did. And I didn't really realize it's been an evolution for me. I love my mother more now today than I've ever in my life, because learning how gemstones work, learning the value of gemstones has made me understand the value of not only my mother, but the other people, women who have been in my life, who have done the things. And I began to start thinking, wow, and seeing even more the similarities between gemstones, or at least emeralds in this case, and mothers, women who are mothers, women who do the things. Because when you think about what an emerald is, when you think about an emerald, when we celebrate Mother's Day, what we're celebrating is a woman who, in our minds, think about the way you felt when you were a child and you saw your mother. That's what your mother was for you. Your mother was beautiful, just beautiful. Your mother, the light that came from your mother, especially when your mother loved you. And I'm not going to cry today. Today is, I've been thinking about this. This has been a hard show to kind of put together, but I'm not going to cry, at least try not to. Someone asked me just really the other day, because I put on Facebook that my mother never told me she loved me. Never. I've been thinking about it, God knows, forever, therapy, everything, never. But if I had to remember the one time that my mother told me that she loved me in a nonverbal way, was my Christmas, my favorite Christmas, when my father hit the number and we had everything for Christmas. We got every toy that existed that year, we got for Christmas. And the one thing that I wanted more than anything else was a microscope. I wanted a microscope so bad. I didn't want a big wheel. I didn't want G.I. Joe. Well, I did want the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip, but more than anything else, I wanted a microscope. And I remember finding this wooden box, big, tall wooden box, like the way they used to do microscopes. And in it was this beautiful microscope. And I remember going to my mother's room, and you never woke up my mother because that was like instant death. But anyhow, I was so moved by getting that microscope. I remember waking my mother up and just telling my mother that, because I still believed in Santa, that Santa brought me a microscope. And I remember just looking at my mom, and she opened her eyes and she said, "Just go play." She says, "That's good. Just go play." And the way she said it, yeah, that's what mothers do. So when you begin to appreciate gemstones, you understand that an emerald is a nurturing stone. Emerald is a stone that people gave each other to demonstrate their love, to demonstrate how much they cared, to demonstrate the beginning of life. That's what an emerald does. When you see emeralds, you see how the shape and the color, the fact that it's green, and green is one of those colors that we as human beings relate to because it means life. And we'll talk more about so many of the characteristics of emeralds and women who are mothers when we come back on the other side. Hi, we're back. I just got to give it up for the best executive producer in the world, Barbara J. Beckley. We never, sometimes we talk, and now I'm in another country. We don't talk all the time about the show, but that commercial is right on point. This is Mental Health Month, and I think part of the way of dealing with, I've had mental health issues. I've been to therapy, told you that. But part of the way you figure that out is beginning to understand your story, understanding the importance of, of not only where you are, but how you got there, and the people that helped you, the people who helped or gave that little part in your life to made you realize how beautiful you are as a person, how beautiful you are as a human being, and how what you are and how you interact with the light. An emerald has a hardness on a hardness scale of from 1 to 10. An emerald is about a 7.5. So it's durable. It resists. It's a gemstone. It's not a gemstone. It does have, I won't say issues, because I told you before that an emerald, one of the defining factors or characteristics of an emerald, of a natural emerald, is the fact that it has inclusions. It has kind of wavy, powdery like inclusions inside of it. Almost all of them do. In fact, if you find one that doesn't, that's extremely rare. But so the defining thing about an emerald is that there's something going on with inside of them, and that's our moms. No, nobody. As I got older, I began to realize and have my own children and take care of children and teach children. I began to realize no child came with a guidebook. When I was born, October 8th, 1960, it didn't say, Mrs. Mixon, here's your child, and here's the child. What you going to name the child? Okay, here's the guidebook for Barry B. Mixon. No. My mother had things going on inside of her. Cleopatra had things going on inside. She had to take care of a whole entire nation's flooding and disease and pestilence and all the people trying to kill her, people trying to take her, all this, and yet she still had the strength to wake up every morning. Because those of you who are mom, children are kids. I don't care. 5,000 years ago, there was some little kid that just said, "Ma." I can imagine Alexander saying to Cleopatra, his sister, and saying to his mother, "Mom, Cleopatra keeps chasing me with an alligator. Alexander, stop chasing your brother with that alligator." I mean, it's the same issues that she had to deal with, and she had to do it by herself. Mark Anthony had twins with her and like ghosted her for 3 years. And because I'm sitting there as a grown man and everything, I just said, wow. So not only was she a queen, but she was a queen who was also a single mom, who still had to deal with not only her own children, but the children of her country, her citizens. Think about the strength and the resilience you had to do that. Napoleon never did nothing like that. He had kids. He just needed a womb. But Cleopatra had to have the child. And think about childbirth back 5,000 years ago. There wasn't all these epidurals and everything else. You just had a child. And that was the most dangerous time in a woman, still is, in a woman's life. And yet she did it. She did it. In Emerald. She spoke 9 different languages, and she was the only one in her whole family, family meaning the Ptolemy family, the dynasty, whoever took the time to learn Egyptian. She learned the language of the people that she ruled over. That was different. Strength and resistance. The daggers and things, the emeralds, not just for Egyptians, but throughout history. Throughout history, emeralds were used to demonstrate that strength, demonstrate what that kingdom, that person was wearing. That's why they wore emeralds, because of what it meant. Beauty and elegance. Oh, those of you who are born in May, those of you who have emeralds as your gemstones, those of you who just love emeralds, understand that emeralds are different than other gemstones. Other gemstones like, green diamonds, green diamonds like, yeah, we're a diamond because green diamonds have that scintillation, they have that spark. But an emerald is elegant. There's a quiet elegance to emeralds that no other gemstone really has. There's just a sophistication to an emerald. I saw this just a little while ago, very similar to the symbol of this is Celtic. And look at just the position that the emerald holds with all the gold and diamonds around it, and the symbol for eternity, the symbol for life. And there is an emerald right there in the middle, right there in the middle of that. And there's just a beauty to an emerald that the other gemstones don't have. Look at it. It's breathtaking. This is part of the suite, and I'll talk about that in a second, that Elizabeth Taylor had when she was with Richard Burton. Unconditional love. That's what Cleopatra had. Unconditional love. Unconditional love. I had to when you look at what the way Cleopatra, the way a mom loves her children, you see what unconditional love is. You see what when she had to give up her children in order to save them. She had to save them because she knew the Romans were coming. And Caesarion, who was literally more of a direct descendant of Julius Caesar, she had to protect them. That's what emeralds symbolize, that unconditional love. They had to when Richard Burton bought Elizabeth Taylor her suite, the Bulgari suite, Emerald Suite, which is world famous. This is it. The brooch, the separate necklace, the earrings, is actually a ring, and of course the choker. This is what he wanted to give her because he had unconditional love for her. He loved Elizabeth Taylor. This is the ring that he presented her with. And I mean, obviously, there's ways of showing love without showing that. But what he wanted to do when he loved her and he married her twice, he wanted to present her with something that allowed her to understand that his love had no end. And that's what a mother does. I didn't realize how many ways that my mother loved me when I was a child, because my concept of what love was, it was based on what I saw on TV, and my mother wasn't like that. I grew up with Leave It to Beaver, and these little all these sitcoms where the mothers were just perfect and sweet. That wasn't my mom, but there was things that my mother did to show me unconditional love, despite whatever she was going through. And so, again, an emerald is a symbol of that. An emerald is a symbol of what that means. And then when you put together an emeralds, the structural differences of an emerald, which of course is brittle. An emerald, so is a diamond. They're brittle, but they're brittle in different ways. There's different levels of hardness. They come from different places in as far as the earth is concerned. So when you put those together, those qualities is what manifests. That energy is what manifests when you present someone with an emerald and diamond ring. And it just made me start thinking about all the things that women, not just my mom, but women who basically filled in the spots Again, nurturing, filled in the spots that my mother wasn't able to give me. Didn't want. I won't say didn't. I for years I said just didn't give me. No, she just wasn't able to do it. So God blessed me with people that have been in my life who have loved me, despite all the things going on inside of me. They still said, Barry, hey, you can do this. You know, Barry, you can be this person if that's what you want. That's what a mom does. That's what a mom does. When you think about the craftsmanship that someone had to do to create this ring. To create this ring. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Not a ring, I'm sorry, a bracelet. To create this bracelet. Think about the craftsmanship. Think about what your mother did for you to help you. You know, eat your spinach. You know, all those things that you hated doing when you were a kid because your mother was telling you to do. You know, think about that's the craftsmanship. That's the cutting. That's the faceting that your mom gave you in order to be. I told you many, many, many times that I began to realize that my mother was my first gunnery sergeant. I survived homelessness because of my mother. Yes, part of the reason why I was there was because of my mother, but not because she was at fault, because I didn't understand her story. I didn't understand her story. I didn't understand what she was doing was the same processes that a lapia, okay, does to cut a gemstone. A diamantaire, what he does or she does to cut a diamond, and all those things had to come together in order to create the man I am today. And that's when you get to that point, and which is the whole theme of this program, this show, is to understand is how is it that we can pay this ring. This ring was something like $2 million. This is a $2 million ring. And we value it because it has those characteristics. It has this beautiful color. It has the shape. It has the faceting. It took those diamonds could be at least 600 million years old. The emerald is hundreds of thousands of years old. And we put them all together and we present it as a ring. That is who your mother is. And not only, and she was able to do what this diamond and emerald ring will never be able to do, was be able to create more, to create something even better than herself. That's what when you look at an emerald, think about the people in your life. Think about and I say emeralds because this is the month of May and this is emeralds, but you can make that analogy with any gemstone. And I'll show that to you each and every week because it comes to me and I'm like, wow, I never looked at it like that. I never thought about it like that. The symbol of wealth and luxury. That is when your mother, and I know you say like, how did you make that? Think about it. Think about it. When you were a kid, especially those of you who are older, yeah, it's easy to talk about Elizabeth Taylor and she's wearing part of the Bulgari Emerald suite. But think about it. Symbol of wealth and luxury. Man, in my house in the 1960s, we always had something to eat. There was never a day. I grew up during the days of food stamps and government cheese and government peanut butter. And think about how your mom would just put it together and make these meals that you felt like luxury because you had something to eat. You had a warm blanket to put on. Those are the things that I thought about when I was homeless. That bowl of soup that my mother used to make. And my mother couldn't cook. So I literally learned. My mother learned how to cook with me. Okay, I was the victim. But eventually, when my mother started learning how to cook and practicing, oh yeah, it was wonderful. Renault, one of my French family here, and we talk together. He asked me the other day. He was like, "What was Thanksgiving like in your house?" And I said, "In my house, Thanksgiving was those. We had a 26-pound butterball turkey. I mean, you remember those commercials? We had one of those kind of turkeys. There was what, 7 of us, right? And every year, my mother would just make this whole entire spread. You guys know, because your mothers did the same thing, and you felt like luxury. No, I wasn't. We didn't come from the Princess Di family. We didn't. My mother didn't have anything like that. So the symbol that Princess Di is wearing, that emerald choker that she was wearing, and stuff that made you understand that she is royalty. That's what our mothers did. That's what my mother did with the little things that she had. That when I remember that, and I told you this story before, that how long it would take my mother to get dressed all the time. But when my mother stepped out of the house, stepped out of her room, and literally, she didn't say it then, but I would say it for her, voila. That's what she looked like to me. She was beautiful. That's what we celebrate when we celebrate Mother's Day. We celebrate the day when we knew the queen, when we knew the princess. That our mothers had deserved to wear that. Everybody doesn't wear a crown like that, but our mothers deserve to wear that crown, if no other, for no other reason but the fact that they're our mothers. They created us. See, those emeralds, you don't know where those emeralds come from, but we are better than those emeralds because we know where we come from ultimately. We all know where we came from, that on whatever your date is, that's the day that you came into the world. That's what we celebrate. That's when you begin to realize the importance, the mythological and the mystical significance of being a mom. Of understanding when you begin, especially as a man, when you begin to understand what it means to be a mother, that means that you are just like this. This is the Amazon. This is where the best emeralds are found. The best emeralds are found here in the Amazon forest, rainforest. And from that, you have to understand that somewhere in there is this rare gemstone called an emerald. And the Incas and the Aztecs felt like, and I told you this story before, that they didn't care. I mean, they cared about the gold and that the conquistadors, the Spanish conquistadors wanted, but the thing that they revered, the thing that was sacred, was the whole concept of an emerald, because for them, the light shone within inside of it. Their gods lived within that emerald. That's who our mothers are. That was the light. That was the light that we got from our mothers, just that understanding of what that person is. When you begin to understand the similarities between what we so value with gemstones, then you have to make the analogy to the people in our lives. And you certainly have to make the analogy of our mothers. Of the women, of our mothers, and the women who have nurtured us, the women who have cared for us, especially if you're a man. When you go back to, if you watch the documentary, even the old 1963 documentary with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, Julius Caesar, he was kind of cool, but Mark Antony, he was a mess. He was a mess. He was all over the place. So was Julius Caesar, all over the place. In fact, the reason why he got stabbed because he didn't listen to Cleopatra. So think about how these women have changed us. The part of the mystical and mythological importance that we give to emeralds actually came from Cleopatra because of who she was. Because of the way she saw it, they attributed those gemstones the qualities of of being a gemstone that touched the heart in the spirit. And we'll talk more about that next week, some of the metaphysical aspects of emeralds. But many of that came from the example that Cleopatra gave the people. That's what an emerald, the power, the stories that you hear about emeralds really came from her and who she was as a person. And we attribute those. And because she wore emeralds, we 5,000 years later, we attribute those characteristics to an emerald because of Cleopatra. Take that analogy and think about how many things that you do in your life right now because your mother taught you how to do it, or that was what your mother used to do. She saw it. I think about my niece and nephew, and I think about the way in Gianna's 8 and Boogie is Bryson is 10, and the way they clean the house. That's because their mother Ariel is into cleaning. She cleans, she does all things. So I'm looking at an 8-year-old put her things away because that's what she learned how to do. An emerald, she is a gemstone. She is a gemstone, and we have to value that. We have to see that. So thank you for giving me this opportunity as I close. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to kind of go back to Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day. It should be almost every day, but happy Mother's Day to all the women who are mothers, all the women who have chosen to become mothers. And I hope the homework assignment for this week is take a moment to think about how much your mother has changed your life. Think about the characteristics, think about the qualities, think about the things, the way you see the world now, and begin to appreciate the value of your mother. And if you own gemstones, sit down and think about just for a moment how many of the things that you like about them gemstones and how so many of those characteristics you can see those things in your mother and what she's done for you. So again, thank you so much for being here. See you next week. Again, my name is Barry B. Mixon. I'm coming to you live from France. And again, take the time to discover the value of your story. Au revoir, à te tella, voilà.